Hi, this is a tutorial on how to make your own leads. I'm going to give you an example of how to make your own polarized connector and a straight going through to a straight connector. Polarized connectors are handy for interfacing with development boards and other polarized sensitive boards or devices, and you can get them up to about 20 pin connectors, but they're absolutely everywhere and handy to know if you can make them yourself. And the straight headed connector, this is mainly used for interfacing straight to your breadboard and other things like that. And we'll get started by grabbing the ribbon cable. Ribbon cable's my cable of choice because it's a multi-core wire and it's very flexible and easy to use. And if you use solid core wire, like from Cat 5 cable or something, it can the wire can break inside if it flexes too much. Okay, so I'm going to peel back the wire about 2 centimeters, and the same on the other side. And to get rid of the insulation from the tips, I'm going to use a Stanley knife, and without cutting myself, just roll the wire just down to the core, and then it'll be able to come off nice and easily without damaging the wire. And I do that to all 4. Okay, so I've done all four wires, and now I'm going to tin the leads. This makes it easier to work with later on. Make sure you've got a wet sponge and clean your soldering iron. To tin them, just put a little bit of solder on the lead so there's a small bubble at the end, and just roll it over the wire. To the other side. Pliers come in handy to keep the wire stable. Okay, now for the I'm going to do the polarized connector first. I'm going to grab some of these crimps that just twist off. Might be hard to see on the camera, but they're actually got like a D shape on the end terminal. Just pull that up so that you won't get a fillet of solder on the bottom spring there, because it would be very hard to get off later. Now with your wire, you want it so that there's 2 clasps. You want the tip of the wire just to come above the upper clasp. And then with long nose pliers, just grasp the wire first and then the insulation. And then make sure when you're done that the both clasps are nice and straight with the upper part of the crimp there, and that the crimp isn't skewed around vertically either. So do the other crimp. Okay, now that one's a little bit bent, so I'll just straighten up the lower clasp. And now you want to put some solder on there, just to give it more strength and make it a bit more rigid. So just using the pliers to hold the wire again. You just want to put a bit of solder on there, probably a bit too much. Just so you can make a bridge. A bridge is just the solder is in contact with the metal surface so that there's heat transfer between the two. And once you've got the bridge, just feed a little bit of solder onto the top of the wire, just to give it that extra strength. So this would be where the majority of the strength is for the connector. You don't want too much solder, and if there's a big blob there, it's going to make it really hard to push into the polarized header. So both of those look good. Now I'm just going to make sure that the tang is visible on the back there, because that's the actual piece of kit that'll make sure that the connector doesn't just pull out once you pushed it in. And then just make sure all the alignment's right, and then put the D bend back into shape on the top there. Now they'll slide straight in, and you'll hear a click when they mate, when the actual tang goes over the rectangle cutout, and that's in there nice and firm. and that one as well. Now if you're using polarized connectors from one side to the other, they'll actually have a small 1 or a dot or something in one corner. Just follow that all the way through and make sure it's the same on the other side. That way you keep the polarity between both connectors. And now for the straight headers, I'm just going to cut at the size. In this case I'm just using 2. And to start off with, I'm just going to tin the top of on the small end, because that's where the termination is going to be. So this way the solder flows easier after I wrap the wire around it. Now with the wire, you want it so that the wires bend away from each other. So I'm just going to grab it about halfway down and then bend it around. And the same on the other side. And now placing the header onto that and folding them all the way around. Okay, so I've got both wires wrapped around the end of the terminals, and I'm using the pliers to help hold it in place while I solder it. Now, when you inspect it, just make sure that there's no wires touching each other and that there's good clearance between them. And I'm quite happy with that. What I do to seal the job is put some hot glue over the top of it and a little bit underneath, and just to make it more rigid and to make sure that the wires never actually have the chance to touch each other. And same on the other side. For the polarized headers, you can put a dab of hot glue on one side and the other side, just give it a wriggle around, and then when that sets, it'll be good for a long time. This has already got one wire marked on it to isolate it from the other one, but if it didn't, then just use a permanent marker and mark one side of the wire, follow it through, and just mark it on the other end, so that way you can't get it wrong when you're connecting it up to your PIC or development board. Alright, so I hope that helps someone out, and any other questions, just have a look on my site.